Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to this latest webinar in our series of ERETS focused webinars. I think we've got a really good one for you today, focusing on program design that works. We've got a fantastic panel here today. Just to, before I introduce the exciting panelists, I'll just get some of the pleasantries out of the way. You'll hopefully know me by now. Julian Berriman, I'm the director of the Professional Standards Committee for Europe Active, setting the educational, the skills standards for Europe. And I also head up the European Register of Exercise Professionals. In terms of the discussion today, it's going to be a very open one. There's no PowerPoint presentations. We're just going to have a bit of a chat and see where it takes us. And see if it stimulates some interesting discussion. We can't see any of you guys, but you do have the ability to ask questions. There's a Q&A section there, and you can post your questions there. So please do that, and we'll try and answer those questions as we go along. In terms of generally Europe Active, you can access any of our resources on the website. COVID-19. There's a lot of guidance there. There's all the webinars that we do. This webinar today will be recorded, so you can watch the webinar. Okay, guys. So we've got limited time to introduce my guests very quickly. We've had to change the format a little bit. We lost one of our guests, Rocco Venizelos. Unfortunately, Rocco will join us at another time, but couldn't make it today. And we have stepping into the breach a very special guest, actually, somebody that I've been familiar with for many years, and I've spoken to Anna about this as well. Big fans of Nick Tominello from the US, Performance U. Hi, Nick. Good to have you. We'll get you to do a bit of an introduction in a moment, Nick, if that's okay. Yeah, but great to have you. And I know it's really early in the States, so really appreciate you making the effort to turn up today.
I appreciate the opportunity, and looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, lovely. And we have Anna Bogdanova, personal trainer from Denmark. Anna will be familiar to some of you. She's been on a number of our webinars. Does a lot in the online space, works particularly in that sort of health area, and working with, how can I put that, Anna? I was thinking with older ladies, but that's not an appropriate thing to say. I don't know, but that's your focus, right?
They're coming from different phases of life, but most of them are 35 plus.
Yeah, sure. Okay, lovely. And we have David Kingsbury, a PT from England, celebrity PT, works with a lot of, worked on a lot of films, etc., preparing people for those films. And some of you will be familiar with David as well, because he's also been on a number of other webinars. Okay, so I'll leave it to the guys maybe to say a little bit more about themselves when they first come on screen. But Anna, maybe we can kick this off. So program design that works, and you're actually responsible for this one, Anna, in terms of what was maybe your thought that led to this webinar. And the thought was that we've had a webinar on low back pain and how to work maybe corrective exercise around that area, and I think most of us, have a view to corrective exercise or therapeutic exercise, addressing postural imbalances, muscle imbalances, that kind of stuff. But you made the point that sometimes that can be difficult because working with those exercises is not always the most motivating for clients, and maybe isn't directed as much as you would like towards some of those goals that they might have in terms of body transformation, fat loss, that kind of thing. So that's the thought here. How do we get that balance? How do we have that corrective element, but still achieve the goals that the client would want? So maybe, Anna, you could kick us off by talking about your general approach to that, and then we can bring the other guys in. Over to you, Anna.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. I've been working with clients for 12 years or something, and in the beginning, I was very interested in what is the optimal plan. But as I went along and followed my clients through ups and downs of their lives, then I was starting to focus more on doable, and also on the fact that the long-term progression and the long-term compliance is probably the most important thing, actually. And I've written 3 books on the matter, and maybe the order I've written them in says something about my progression in my approach, because the first one I wrote was called Sky High Metabolism, and it was all about how you can get the maximum body transformation results in just 1 hour a week, because I knew that many of my clients really had this time issue, or they just couldn't find the time and the energy to exercise more, and also feeling that exercise took more energy from them than it gave them. So I think, okay, let's address the time topic. But as I progressed and worked with my clients on this subject, and kind of scaled up and scaled down, it developed to my last book, which is called Panellist, which actually is like the prequel. Because I found out there are actually many things, many barriers standing in the way of the long-term compliance, of the long-term progression. And that's where I found the sweet point between rehab and prehab, and actually doing something that gives so much metabolic result that the client sees and feels the changes in their body and tightening up and seeing the muscle contours and feeling lighter, feeling more energized, at the same time as we're actually working towards them being more and more pain-free and being able to move more in their everyday life. So the core of my approach is shortly that the exercise is like medicine, is like a dose or like a vitamin pill maybe that we have to give them. And the most important thing is that it starts a positive cascade through the whole day, through the whole week, through the whole month. So we really need to focus on how do we program that exercise that feels doable for the client, so they don't get overwhelmed before they start, so they don't frighten their workouts and actually feel like they want to do them. At the same time, while we are making them move so much better and more pain-free, that they start moving more in their everyday life. And we get more like a positive cascade in movement and positive desire and a pull towards physical exercise, and also physical, not exhaustion, because that's not the word I use, but you know, when you push yourself and you can feel like something's happening. And that's the zone that many of my clients kind of can feel a little fear towards pushing themselves. So always balancing on how can we push a little but not push too much, so that it gets to start a positive cascade.
Okay, lovely. And that sort of chimes maybe with something that I was reading on your website, Nick. Anna's just talking about doable. That, you know, it has to be something that works within that sort of pain-free area for clients, and doesn't demotivate them in being too strenuous. And I see on your website all about practicality. That's how you refer to yourself. So could we maybe hear on your thoughts here, Nick, at this point?
Yeah. Well, first off, Anna, I wanted to give you the slow clap to what you just said there. That's the first time I've heard you speak, and everything that you said there was really resonated with me. So your clients are lucky to have you. You know, it's funny. What does it say about our field? I'm going to say this in kind of a joking manner, that we have to have discussions called program design that works, because it shows us that a lot of the program design education that we've been given, what does it say about it, right? And I have a little saying, and I always try to put my finger on, you know, how did this happen? How do we get here? Why wasn't this the way it was? Who was teaching us before? Because they were all experts and very well intentioned, and some of the smartest and best and brightest from the world. And the best way I could describe it is that we were trying to take what was in textbooks and in academia and bring it to the gym floor. But as our field grew, what we realized is the importance of trying to take, and this really exemplifies what Anna was talking about, is trying to take what we see on the gym floor and bring it to the education realm. Because there's this thing called consequential knowledge. And consequential knowledge is normally what we don't gain unless we have experience. And it's the knowledge of the consequences or the outcomes or the responses that happen when you try to implement these things. And it comes down to, are clients going to enjoy it? Are clients going to be consistent with it? Is it going to be long-term? All these other things. And now that's what we're starting to bring together. And that's what we really mean by program design that works. You know, it basically, so I'll kind of give my spiel. The everyday client really wants four things. So when I say the everyday client, we have on one end, we have the person training for like a physique competition, you know, bikini, bodybuilding, somewhere, basically getting on stage and flexing, right? My mom used to be a bodybuilder. On the other side, we have people who are competing in athletics, right? They may not make a career in it. They might not be a professional athlete where they get paid, but they're, you know, they do high-end training and they're training for things. And then for the majority of people that we work with, most of the time we call them in the States general population. You may have a different term for them across the world. Somewhere in the middle. And it's what I call the F4 client. And they want four things that all tend to start with F in no particular order. Fitness, function, fat loss, fun. Right?
Again, and Nick, what was that?
Fitness, function, fat loss, fun.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, now, you know, I can get into the definitions, but fitness is they basically want to get less tired, right? Function is they want to basically move better and feel stronger. Fat loss, not everybody actually is in a caloric deficit. Not everybody wants to, you know, build their life around kitchens and gyms. So normally what they mean, speaking to Anna's other point, is they want a metabolically demanding workout, right? Something that's going to challenge them. A lot of people are, as I like to say, they're training for defense, right? They're trying to offset all the things they like to eat, which is why a lot of us experienced trainers have clients that don't look that much different physically from the day they started training with us, but they're much better and stronger humans. And that brings me to the last F, which is fun. What we're really talking about there is they know it's going to challenge them. We don't mean fun like, you know, going to a water park or something like that. But fun is in that it doesn't suck. It's not boring for them. They feel better at the end of the workout than they did in the beginning. They're looking to come back. That's the buy-in. That's the neck up training. We always tend to think about program design from the neck down. What are you doing biomechanically and physiologically and said principle and all these other things, right? What's happening with the scapula, yada, yada, yada. But if it doesn't get them from the neck up, then none of those other things really matter, right? So that's the importance of blending what a client wants. And then we create as a trainer, a lot of trainers get upset when they hear me say that, when they say, well, I don't tell my accountant how to do my taxes. You're letting your clients dictate what they want. No. What you're saying is that just because I may like powerlifting or I may like physique training or kettlebell training or whatever certification I happened to take last week, that's the hottest thing in my mind right now, right? Doesn't mean I'm going to inflict that on anybody else. The client tells me what their goals are. Usually they kind of fall into that F4 thing. And it's my job to be their guide and basically show them the safest, most direct path to stay on that, in that direction for a lifetime. And as another point Anna said that I like, and build a love for movement and for their body, and to keep exercising in the way that they want. Unfortunately, to circle it around, a lot of the information that we're provided is so influenced by powerlifting or sports performance that we try to do things to clients versus do things for clients.
Yeah, excellent, Nick. Yeah, thank you. And by the way, guys, feel free at any point when anybody's talking, if you want to sort of raise your hand or you just want to come in without, you don't have to be introduced by me, please interject. But I love that, Nick. Yeah, fitness, function, fat loss, and fun. That works for me. But what I think is quite interesting there is looking at the function side of things, and I guess that sort of maybe goes back to the intention really behind this webinar. That maybe with the introduction of that word function and functional, you know, a few years back in the industry now, and we've seen the growth of that area of provision, or love the cap, Nick, and style of training, and we see functional areas in gyms, etc. So we did see that massive growth of functional exercise, and a big part of that was assessment, postural assessment, be that static or dynamic, and then, you know, and then a prescription of a program of corrective exercise, which often went from quite small exercises to quite big exercises in terms of complexity. So we saw that tremendous growth, and I did witness a lot of guys in gyms doing very small exercises, which were very well intentioned in terms of activating their gluteals or whatever, but maybe not that well focused in terms of keeping that client on board. David, do you want to maybe interject and speak to that maybe a little bit?
Sorry, it's just muted. So yeah, I mean, I sort of have a slightly you know, a different introduction from people to maybe that Anna has there, and the fact that often I work with people that do too much. A lot of people, they come to me because they are doing a huge amount of training already, and they might be struggling to see progress. They might be struggling to get to where they want to get to. And for a lot of the time with the people I work with, they're actually, you know, it's the opposite issue for them, is that they're doing far too much, and, you know, whether they're putting their body through too much stress or they're just not focusing on the right areas, that can be, you know, one of the limiting factors there. And I think I very much agree with what Nick says there in terms of the reasons why they're training. And so when I'm creating the training for each person, whether it be an online client or an in-person, you know, client, or at one of the gyms or whatever it might be, it's definitely a case of, you have to understand what it is they're wanting to get out of it before you can then give them that, and plus some of the things that they need as well. So it's about wants and needs in these situations, I think. And so if someone, you know, for the people that work with me that are training, that they come on board and they're training every day, or they want to train twice a day, it's more for them, there's more to it than just the end result, right? They're training for other reasons than just the end result, because if it was just the end result, they wouldn't necessarily be doing so much training. And so for them, it could be the fun side, or it could just, you know, maybe not even fun, but maybe is something a little bit is, you know, from switching off from their, you know, their days of activity, you know, as a form of meditation, escape, whatever it is. Like, you know, if you look at endurance, like I do a lot of endurance sports, things like that, as well as the weight training. So I'm on both, I'm on the kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. I do strength work and I do fitness work, which is just not necessarily ideal, but I enjoy both elements. And a lot of the kind of long distance cardio and things like that I do, it's a really good switch off. And yes, it may not be optimum for my goals, but I enjoy it, and therefore I will do it. And so when I'm, you know, when I'm kind of doing the assessment and things like this, and this goes for function, this goes for the enjoyment side of things, and it goes for the result side of things, is actually finding out why it is they're exercising, because sometimes it isn't as simple as wanting to achieve fat loss or achieve, you know, muscle gain. There's other reasons behind it. Find out what that is, and then also, you know, so providing an element of that, but then also incorporating things that person needs. So giving them what they want, but also giving them, you know, and sometimes sneaking it in a little bit of what they need as well. And this could be, you know, just in the functional sense and the movement sense, it could just be, you know, adjusting and being selective with certain exercises to try and support their goals, but also to support any biomechanical issues or any, you know, any of these things where they want to train hard, but, you know, so you may not want to strip it back so they're doing nothing. You know, you strip it back to a point where they're doing exercises that are going to be beneficial, but are also going to, you know, support their goals and their movement patterns too. So I do think that, you know, it's absolutely a case of looking at a combination of what the individual is wanting to get out of exercise from a results point of view, and from an energy point of view as well. And then providing some of that, and then some of the expert stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? Some of the kind of real thought process, the kind of expertise side as well.
Yeah, absolutely, David. And I guess that's sort of, maybe that speaks to some of our earlier conversations, Anna, about, you know, how we work with our clients in terms of maybe the client taking a less passive role and actually being more active in that process, i.e. we should be listening to our clients rather than simply prescribing and thinking, as Nick was referring to earlier, that we have all the answers and telling them what they should do rather than listening to them and catering for some of the things that they actually want in their workout, David. So yeah, I totally get the point. Anna, you raised your want to say?
Yeah, something David said about that some clients actually do too much. And that's an interesting thing, because I think that many professionals and clients as well, they have this continuum from you can either do less of something or you can do more of something. I'm really interested in the area that's called maybe you should do something different. So maybe sometimes if cardio or some kind of sport is actually a coping mechanism for them to deal with stuff and actually reduces emotional stress but adds on the physical stress of stuff, then we could try to talk to the client about another way of doing something physical which actually takes some of the load off, and still to introduce them to kind of different movements, different ways doing things, different tempo, different modality, or different, not just one long session but maybe several short sessions, and kind of break it up a little, but actually just try to think about nuances in this, and not as much as you should do more of that or less of that.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, totally get that.
And sometimes I'm sorry, it's I was thinking about this, okay, how to actually talk about program design in such a short time and still kind of give something really concrete or specific. And I think that when we talk variety and something else, then I'm very interested in different systems like the sensory system, the visual system, the vestibular system. Try to actually get some of that into some of the physical training, because many of my clients, they actually lack stimulus on many different ways, and not just their heart pumping and not just their body moving in some way and range of motion in different positions if they are sitting still a lot. So they actually do need to kind of stimulate their system in a sensory motor way to kind of function better. And I like to drizzle that all over the kind of the big impact exercises, because it's not something they necessarily think is fun or easy to do, but when you just put it in the breaks or something like that, or as a warm-up, they actually feel a lot better and have a better experience of the workout afterwards.
Sure. Okay. So that point of something maybe doing something different, that's good, and that seems to that has a functional feel to it, Anna, in that you're introducing different systems and thinking about different systems in your training. That's quite interesting, though, isn't it? Something different, because maybe I'm thinking again of the growth of functional exercise when we first started looking at that area, and there was a lot of stuff going on with stability balls, etc., etc. And there was a lot of misinterpretation of what that what that meant to be functional, and there were a lot of people doing weird things on stability balls, standing, juggling, whatever they were doing. And we maybe, in an effort to do something different, we lost sight of the basics and keeping the simplicity in what we do at times. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts, Nick, on that.
Yeah, actually, I think you made great points there. So I have a few points, and I'm going to try to bring it now around a little bit more specifically towards programming and exercise selection. Talking about kind of the idea of moving back in towards, more of the basics, and a little less, I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth, but a little less into the corrective realm. Not that there's nothing beneficial from that, but that maybe there's other ways we can get those same therapeutic benefits as corrective exercise by using, for lack of a better word, more general exercise, by understanding the exercise selection. And I think, so far we've been talking about kind of client psychology in a roundabout way, but I think some of this actually comes down to our trainer psychology. And here's what I mean. When you actually try to simplify something and it actually looks fairly simple, a lot of us trainers go, that can't be right, because it's got to be technical. I've been told that it has to be very technical, and then I have to, you know, have the left eye closed while you breathe out of this lung a little bit more while you bring the right toe up and you're balancing over here. Like, you mean it's just pushing and pulling and hinging and knee bending and pain-free? Like, no, that can't be right. How do I justify myself that I'm better than all of my competition if I can't pathogize you and come up with all these fancy Shaolin monk secret exercises and buttons to the body that I know how to press that nobody else does, right? That nobody else knows. So, and that's why all these types of, you know, we all have a desire to help people, and we all want to, well, I can't say we all, a lot of people want to be the best. And a lot of the arguments that we see with trainers about this training modality versus that, and my 3 or 4 letter acronym certification is better than your 3 or 4 letter acronym certification. Oh, no, it starts with the feet. No, it's all about the breathing. No, it's all about the rib angle. You know what I mean? It's just like, all I know is you all think everybody's broken. That's all I know. You know what I mean? And normally your assessments end up finding exactly what you specialize in treating. And that's interesting. Right. So when you pull all that aside, what it really brought us down to is that everybody's passionate and everybody's heart's in the right place, and there is some good things to be taken from that. But we lost our way in that we made the training session more about the assessment or the screening procedure or evaluation or whatever word you want to use to it, and less about creating a training effect that the client really wants. Yes. Now we're at the point where the question is, training program design is a series of decision making, because there are no solutions, there are trade-offs, right? Every time you say yes to doing one thing, you're saying no to doing other things, right? The question is weighing those trade-offs. And when you weigh trade-offs, the 2 questions that you have to ask, just like anybody in politics would ask about a political policy, is, if you're going to do that, at what cost? In this case, it's at what cost to time, at what cost to, do you need equipment for it or not? You know, how long will it take to do with the client? How much time does it take? And as opposed to what? As opposed to another alternative. So for example, the question we have to ask ourselves is, can we get, if we're going to talk about corrective stuff, can we get the same therapeutic benefits, let's say for a general low back pain person, can we get the same therapeutic benefits that you might get with some sort of corrective exercise methodology? Can we get those if we're doing more general exercises, right? Pushing, pulling, while we also get the therapeutic benefits? And we know both anecdotally and from the research now, for the most part, yes, we can. So
tell us more, Nick. Tell us more. That's it. That's what we want. We want the answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I'll give you a really simple example, and then I'll shut up, right? So a lot of people might do scapula, retractions like this. Well, the question is, it's like, yeah, but if you coached a row really well, you got the scapular retraction. Right? I don't mean the scapula's back and then doing this like a robot, but if you're coaching the row properly, you're getting the scapulas to move, right? So was the person's problem that they just needed to sit here and do this, or was their problem is that they've just been too sedentary and they just needed to do, I like what Anna said about doing something different. Is it just the fact that they never got into that range of motion before? And it's kind of if you don't use it, you lose it. So sometimes if the problem is easy to identify, you have a limited number of movements in your daily activity, which are not very active because you're sedentary. So, okay, so I make you less sedentary and I get you to move in different ways that you don't normally do. Let's try that first and see where you go. I always say, before you explore, you think the solution is outside of general exercise, first make sure the solution is not within general exercise. And normally we jump to the Shaolin monk secret training. Close this eye, put your hand behind your back, reach the left hip, breathe with this rib over here and do this. It's like, yeah, that stuff's impressive and cool, but did you just try coaching a really good row first?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? And normally we kind of skip that part. And like I said, I think some of that is on us, our fault as an industry. We've almost educated trainers out of general exercise and differentiating themselves from being the best at exercise selection and individualization and organizing and prioritizing exercises. That's what we're trying. Trainers should separate themselves. Instead, we've made trainers separate themselves by which Shaolin monk secrets of the body, 3 or 4 letter certification that they know to differentiate themselves and how to find these secret dysfunctions that only they know how to fix.
Yes, no, absolutely, Nick. That's brilliant. Thank you. I think, yeah, there is a case to be said for there's become a bit of an over focus on the assessment side of things, and particularly in that sort of postural sense, looking at various muscle imbalances, and then you've got to do this, and then you've got to do that. Whereas, as you say, perhaps if we were just teaching and coaching those fundamental exercises, those fundamental movement patterns well, then we could, and people were capable of doing that, and it made sense to them, then we're in a better place.
I'm really with you on this getting basics better stuff, because one thing you said, Nick, was that, I'm not sure even in what context, but I just heard something like you feel broken and pathologizing people. And that's one of the things that I and my team say the most to our clients, that you're not broken, nothing is wrong with you. You just need to kind of learn to do that better. So show them that there is nothing wrong with them if they can squat without feeling pain or something like that, but just kind of lay it out and say, okay, there's a gap from you being able to do 100 a day squat challenge, and don't do that. but getting maybe them to try a movement that they know, because they tried to do that at a class or something else, and then like, I can do squats. My knee hurts, so my knees are bad, and my body's not built for squats. Something I hear many times. Then I can just like, okay, let's just take the squat, because you know what it is and you've seen it and you've tried it, but now let's try to do that with another tempo, with another focus, with another muscular connection, and really just try to take it down to the stage where you can feel you're stable and you can control that, and then get back up. And maybe it's not a full squat, and that's okay, because you'll get there. So actually just kind of deconstructing the basics and scaling them mostly down for my clients really does have the therapeutic effect for really, really many reasons. And they get the metabolic effect as well, because they really learn how to involve the whole body and their muscles in the movement. So I'm a great fan of the basic stuff, and just teach them better.
Yeah. Okay. No, absolutely. David?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that we're all on the same page in this respect a lot. And the way I work is very similar. We do movement screenings for everyone, but the movement screenings we do are generally to address major issues rather than minor issues in a lot of respects. And, in those situations, if we see major issues with movement screenings, then there'll be a little bit more adaptation to the exercise selection. But if they are, minor issues, there'll be slightly less adaptation to exercise selection. And I mean, from a movement selection point of view and a programming point of view, I don't put too much emphasis on different exercises being better or worse than others. It's very much a case of just looking at the individual, looking at their goals, and being selective based on that. So, for example, like for myself, I have hereditary back issues. I have arthritis in L4 and L5, and it affects my movement patterns massively. I could go and have surgery on it because I've got a few, discs that are fused. Sorry, not discs, but vertebrae that are fused, which is purely hereditary, nothing to do with movement pattern or anything like that. But it very much restricts my exercise, my movements. There's certain things that I can do very comfortably, and there's certain things I can't do very comfortably. And so I'm just selective with my movements. If I go with the movements I am comfortable doing, I can train very effectively and very pain-free. If I go for those movements which cause me a lot of aggravation, then it becomes very painful. And so it's just being aware of that too, that there's no kind of perfect routine or perfect exercise or anything like that. I don't feel that everyone has to do this, squats, for example. I don't do heavy loaded squats or anything like that within my routine. But what I will do is I'll include some, something like body weight squats, for example. So I'm still working through a good range of movement in that position. So I am able to get off a chair, right? But in terms of my loading and things like that, I'll load different movements, and I'll be selective with different exercises. So I do think that, having movement screenings is very useful for kind of, if someone was to do a movement screening on me, they would see very clearly that I have hip, back and disc issues. They would see that very clearly in the way that I move, and therefore they can be selective with the exercises. But if someone's having a movement screening, for example, where they have pretty solid movement patterns, then you can absolutely just coach the basic movements really well, and they'll get a lot of the improvements from a mobility and functional point of view based on the fact that they are working effectively through a good range of movement and getting better at those basic movements.
Okay, good. So we're all sort of maybe moving towards which almost feels like a back to the basics kind of approach here, and looking at the big exercises potentially and how we can adapt, etc. I was looking on your website, Nick, just because we're very privileged to have you here today, so I'm keen to hear more. And I was looking at I think you have a course called Mobility and Activation Paired Sets course. And that seemed to speak a little bit, I'm back on the postural corrective, but it seems to speak to that a little bit. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that approach and how that all works, and that would trigger a bit more conversation.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say you're doing a fantastic job with the e-stalking, Julian. I appreciate that. You keep that up, my friend.
I'm good at it.
Yeah. So
I'm watching.
I really appreciate Dave's comments just now, and I actually want to just clarify something. I was not. I think it's extremely important to assess and evaluate clients. Obviously, when you start getting into the terms that you use, screen, evaluation, assessment, that could be discussions and different things. So I was certainly not promoting not to evaluate. It's probably a separate issue. I'll try to just address that really quickly, though, just to clarify. And I think sometimes this does get to the heart of the matter. Technically, from an education definition perspective, this is not really semantics, but it's going to sound that way. An assessment would be more of a individually determined thing. It basically say, so Julian, if you're assessing me, you would basically say, you would not be comparing me to any external numbers or any external baseline. You would just say, where are you at right now, right? So an example would be finding my optimal squat stance. How wide should my feet be? Do I need to turn my feet out a little bit? As long as I can meet the general standards of a squat, which is trying to keep that lordotic curve, try to keep my knees over my toes, that kind of stuff, right? So as we say, you have standards of form, but you're not standardized, which means you're not a robot. Not everybody stands the same way, okay? That would be more an assessment. An evaluation, which we don't really hear about as much, would be more of an externally imposed metric on something, right? So it would basically be saying, okay, well, Nick, you weigh 100. I'm going to use dumb American weight here, pounds, but you weigh 170 pounds, so therefore, you should at least have a body weight squat. So where is your strength relative to that? Now, I'm not saying we would do a 1RM squat with a beginner client. I'm just using an example of an evaluation versus an assessment. Now, that's important because it really comes down to the baselines that we all use to make training decisions. And there's a lot of discussion to be had about where does your baseline come from? For example, what is normal? What is abnormal? And what we've found through a lot of research and a lot of the heart of this discussion through anecdote is that we're taught that what is human normal, you stand this way, this is ideal posture, or this is the way to move, this is what an ideal squat should look like. There is far too much disagreement and argument about, are they just variations of normal? So a lot of times we're taught that this is abnormal, therefore it needs to be fixed, or abnormal, the word is dysfunctional. The argument is that really a dysfunction, or is that a variation of normal? You see, and that's beyond the scope of this to get into, but that's a lot of times where we lose our way, right? We try to a lot of times fix something that we say is abnormal, but the argument is that really abnormal? Or so now, that being said, what we do know is that humans are like cars, where we can all do the same general movement patterns: sit, stand, walk, or we can use trainer terms: push, pull, locomote, right? Lunge, squat, hinge, yep, rotate, yada, yada. Just like a car, you drive forward, backwards, left, right, stop, start. However, you would never expect a brand new Mini Cooper, and I say new meaning perfectly functioning, we would never expect a brand new Mini Cooper to drive the same way as a brand new minivan, because the center of mass is different, right? The gear ratio is different. So with that analogy, if I assess the minivan based on Mini Cooper driving specs, how quickly it should turn, I'm gonna deem it dysfunctional, right? Yep. So my whole training direction is off. So again, that's where the issue lies. Where is that standard? Where is that baseline you're judging from as dysfunctional? So now, that brings me to this. I'm assessing as well, right? But my assessment is more, where are you at? And it's all about really deselecting, right? So, we have 200 plus different Romanian deadlift variations, right? One leg, two leg, wide stance, kettlebell, sandbag, band around the waist, not band around the waist, we can go on. The questions I have when I'm doing my assessment is, which variations are going to allow you to keep the general movement standards, lordotic curve, mostly hip hinge, slight bend in the knees, pain-free, that you can control it? I call it the 2 C's, right? Comfort and control. Comfort means it's challenging, but not painful. And can you control it, right? Meaning, can you keep the general alignment cues that I'm giving you? That's A. And then 2, which variations am I going to deselect based on those 2 C's criteria? And that's normally what makes an individualized program. It's normally what exercises you don't do based on an individual's skeletal framework, medical history, pain presentations. I'm not as much, that's what I'm looking for when I do assessments. I'm not as much into some organization tells me this is ideal posture, or that this is ideal movement, and then I'm going to try to fit you to that. I have a saying: we don't fit clients to exercises. We fit exercises to clients. So that's the fundamental difference between how I assess and how I find a training direction. The reason I wanted to clarify that is because a lot of times people hear what I said before, and David, I'm not saying that you made this assumption. I just wanted to clarify, because we started talking about assessments, is that it can sound like that I'm saying don't assess, just go ahead and just start people exercising. Sure. And that's not the case. What I'm saying is trainers have always had an assessment procedure, and we just never really called it that. It's called good technique. Oh, you can't do it in good technique? Well, let me coach you up. Oh, I coached you up and it didn't fit you? Well, I just won't do that exercise and I'll find an alternative. Yeah. So we're always assessing. Yeah. Sometimes we've just sometimes got caught up into the trainer versus trainer debates of what standards does my 3 or 4 letter certification that I follow, or the few that I follow that I've hybridized, and how do they match up with your thing? And that's where a lot of the confusion lies, because at that point, you don't know where to start. You go to one certification, it's all about looking at rib angle. You go to another one, it's all about the feet. You go to another one, it's old school posture. You go to another one, it's about movement patterns. It's like, all I've learned from all these things is that no one should start exercising until they first fix their dysfunction. So you know what? And, I don't even know how you got through the door to come into the gym because you're dysfunctional. Because I had a mentor of mine a long time ago when I was like 18. He goes, we were talking about assessments. I'm 40 now, so this was 22 years ago. And he goes like this. He goes, those assessments, he goes, nobody ever passes those things. Mm-hmm. That's still true to this day.
Yeah. Excellent. Some great thoughts there. I like your comfort and control and the adaptation of exercise, which sort of speaks to those, again, back to basics, the ability to progress exercise and the ability to regress exercise, which is sort of what we're taught right at the outset of all of this, and we've made it sort of incredibly complex. Guys, David, Anna, anything in response to that?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I from what Nick was saying there, like, you know, in terms of the assessment process, as a coach who's been doing it for a long time, as we all have, you know, every single movement that someone takes, you're watching, right? You know, you don't necessarily need like a complicated assessment process to see how someone's moving when you're actually coaching and training them, because you're going to see a huge amount more throughout every single rep and set of exercise throughout every single session. Yeah, so I do think that a lot of that just comes from the sessions itself, and then from an adaptation point of view, that as Nick was saying there, you can look at all the different courses and stuff like that, but there's just a huge amount to be said for experience in working with people and understanding. You get a good understanding of how people are feeling in terms of their discomfort or their enjoyment, or, you know, there's plenty of really good exercises which people are going to hate doing, and so you can see that, like, and you're not going to push them to do it, even if you think it's going to be one of the maybe a better exercise for them in some ways. If you can tell that they're not enjoying it or they're not feeling it, you know, then you make adjustments and you make adaptations. I mean, in terms of like selecting, you know, it being back to basics, I think that's definitely true to an extent, but it's not. I wouldn't say that it has to be. You know, it doesn't. You know, not all the movements have to be basic either. There are. And by basic, I mean, you know, a lot of people go on like the big 3 or the big 4 or however many, you know, like the deadlift, the squat, the push, you know, like a pull up, an overhead press and a bench press or whatever. Like a lot of people, they would treat those as the kind of, the basic, back to basics. Like a lot of people talk about that, but I wouldn't look at the exercises in that sense. I would look at more of the sort of movement patterns. And this is where you could have more of, you know, being more selective in terms of actually doing exercises people might not have done before, but they are still working on those movements, you know, the hip hinge or you know, or whatever it might be, but just doing it in different ways. And there's a lot of exercises that I work, you know, I train a lot of people that have trained for a very, very long time and have kind of do a lot of that, you know, basic sort of training. And I will introduce exercises that maybe they've never done before. But that it's not to say the exercises are complicated or that they are, you know, very difficult to master or anything like this. It might just be that they're not exercises that the person has really considered before, or they've not understood before, or they've not tried before. And so I think that there's plenty of opportunity to utilize it. You know, I'm not going to say new exercises because there's probably no such thing, but like, you know, variations on exercises that people might find more comfortable and certainly more enjoyable as well.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Yes, I mean, we can identify those big exercises and we want to be able to coach them well, etc., etc. But clearly, part of our role as PTs or whatever coaches is maybe to introduce some new things that people haven't experienced before, but also to coach those new things well also.
I like to actually see at the exercises in 2 different parts. So one is the basic exercises, which would be definitely something that you can do something whole body and which would have kind of a metabolic effect. So there could be squats, that could be hinge, that could be push and pull and stuff like that. And the other part of exercises, that's accessory exercises. And there can be so many different exercises there. And what I like to use that for is actually to make people better at the basics exercises. So when I look at them, I would see, okay, show me what you can do and show me what you cannot do. And just try to watch the move during through different movement patterns. And I like to go like in a helicopter view and see the negative space, if you can say it in that way. So like see where do they lack some stimuli? Where do they lack conscience of their body in movement? And try to kind of see, okay, we're doing squats and we're doing 3 or 5 squats, and try to coach through the tempo and through the depth of the squat. And then in the breaks, try to find an accessory exercise that would create better body mapping. So let's say that they have a hard time extending the back, or have hard time actually keeping the curve, or shoulder slouch. So kind of do something that will create more safety in movement, because then you actually add some stimuli. Or maybe you see, okay, the client is always looking down. Can we try to ask them to bring their eyes up a little? So I try to see that in front of me, like there is a space in which the client is moving, and then there is a space where they're not safe moving, not consciously. And then try to kind of make the space where they're safe moving get a little more, like spread a little more. So kind of try to see, okay, which exercises can we do? And that can be touch, actually, just making some skin stimulation on the body parts, moving in the breaks, can make people squat better during the next round and the next round. So so I like to see that help people get the right letters that they need to form the words. So the basic movements are the words, and what you can do with them are sentences afterwards. But inside the gym, then maybe sometimes they just lack some letters, and we can try to help them get some more letters. So during the session, that we can I always maybe choose 1 or 2 exercises to focus on during one session. And the accessory exercises I'm doing are supposed to make the client move better and better and better and better and better through the session, and get more and more, what do you call it? Actually, more muscular contraction. I really like that, because it does this metabolic effect. And many of the clients I have actually trouble kind of tensing the muscles. So they're not neurally active or effective. And we try to kind of turn up for the neural effect during the session to get more and more muscular contraction, so they can kind of have an effect of the session, even though we didn't train with the load that I would like them to train with to create some effect. So we try to create loading in a different way during the session. Does it make sense at all?
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. David, I'm aware that you're probably going to have to go.
Yeah, I've got to shoot off in a couple of seconds. So if you do see me dip out, then thanks very much for much for having me on today. Yeah,
thanks for your contribution. Great stuff. Thank you, and we'll see you again.
Yeah, perfect. Catch you later.
Yeah, cheers. But maybe back to you, Nick. So any thoughts on what Anna was just saying there? That really, I mean, it was, we can identify some exercises, but then we can maybe enhance those exercises, almost like some tweaks to those exercises to. The phrase body awareness was sort of coming to mind there as Anna was talking, that they're aware of how they're moving more, and we all do that, don't we? We do an exercise, and then as we progress with that exercise, the performance of that exercise, we start to appreciate the nuances of that exercise a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I'm bummed that David had to jump out, because I really wanted to applaud him for his comments that he said. He made a very prolific statement of, it's less about specific exercises, meaning like the big 3 or the big 4. That would be more powerlifting, and more about generalized movements. Now, of course, different trainers have their different categories of movements, right? I will say mine. We use what I call the 8 main functional movements, and they're split into the 4 main athletic movements and the 4 main lifting movements. So the 4, in total, they're the 8. And I'll define what I mean by functional, because I know that's a term that some trainers get, very triggered by. Oh, it's a meaningless term,
You know what term to use, yes.
So actually, let me just start with that. Let me define. I've heard all the arguments, and they're all very reasonable about the term functional, because, it's meaningless because it means different things to different people, and yada, yada. I get that. I stick with the dictionary term. At least it gives us some objective grounding, and if you look in the dictionary, you will see, and of course, every word has certain different contexts. Within the context that's closest to training, the word function means for a specific task or purpose. So the dictionary doesn't say meaningless fitness word, move on to next word, right? So the problem that, so in the context of that, for a specific function or purpose, that has really, that is an important concept in training. Now,
yeah, has value. Yeah.
It has value. Now, what we're really after, because one task or one purpose is limited, right? Am I good at pushing this way? But what about when I have to push across and rotate? That's a different task or purpose. So what we're really trying to do, just remember that F, fitness function,
Yep.
is we're trying to increase people's functional capacity, which means your range of abilities. So someone who has a higher functional capacity has a larger range of specific tasks or purposes, right? They have, speaking to Anna's point, they have a larger movement vocabulary. So when we say someone has limitations, what we're really saying is that there's only, I'm just going to use pushing as an example, there's only so many pushing exercises that we can do with you pain-free and control, whereas someone else, I can give them a lot of different pushing variations, right? So their toy box, right, and their playground is expanded. And the issue that a lot of people run into, which is why it's important to have your assessment procedures and a thoughtful process with training, where a lot of trainers go wrong, is they take people that have a certain number of abilities and they go outside that, right? Which is why we see all these YouTube fail videos or a lot of videos that trainers post with their heart's intention, but a lot of other trainers going, you didn't know that was a fail video, but to me it's a fail video, right? So, where people are doing things that they totally are not able to control, or when that's an overreaction to the other side. Now, back to my 8 main functional movements. So 4 athletic main and 4, this is kind of the bedrock of everything that I do, and 4 main lifting movements. So athletic movements in no particular order. So we have jumping and landing. Notice I said and landing, jumping and landing, throwing and striking. So not only, that would be, I work with a lot of combat athletes, but something like throwing and striking. Locomotion, is running, skipping, shuffling, crawling, climbing, carrying, pushing sleds, dragging sleds, all those fall in. Swimming, all that's locomotion. And rotation. No particular order there. That's the 4 main athletic movements. 4 main lifting movements are, and again, no particular order: pushing, pulling, hip hinge, knee bend. I'm not going to get into why we call it knee bend and not a squat, but I'm not going to get too far into that.
Okay.
But there are reasons for that. So those, basically what I'm trying to find is that those are at the heart of all sporting and life movements, and we're trying to expand your functional capacity in each one of those realms. Now, obviously, some of these are going to be less important than others. The general fitness client, jumping and throwing is not going to be as important to them, but doing some power exercises, even if it, if it's fast band presses or fast band, squats as fast as they can go, which may not be fast to your eye, but to them, their intention is to move fast. Even as a senior. Why? Because if you know the research, you know that as we age, we actually lose power, our rate of force production, at a faster rate than we lose strength, which is our ability to produce force. So power isn't just for athletes. I don't want to get off on separate tangents here, but that's
good stuff. Good stuff.
I love that point, really.
Yeah, so that's the bedrock, and then that's where, and basically the concept there with your assessment or evaluation, which is an ongoing process, is which of these movements and how to do them, speaking to Anna's points, and range of motion, stance, are we going to deselect and then focus on? But the idea is that, speaking to David's point, is that we often think about people being too sedentary and that they don't do basic things. But the problem that we've run into now, which is the overreaction from the late 90s and early 2000s, which was wobbly, stand on wobbly everything, and any movement that I can make up and come up with cool nomenclature for is functional. Now it's gone the other way, where just do barbell lifts, right? And everything, I always joke and say everybody want to be a power lifter now. At that case, they're not sedentary, but they've become a master at a small number of movements, but they're really not a great mover, right? If I take you to the jiu-jitsu flat mat or the climbing gym, you don't really, because you've mastered a limited number of movements. So in that case, that's where it's important to introduce, when you say new, we don't mean new exercises. We mean, okay, well, you've always been pulling this same way in the same rehearsed pattern, but let's try to change that up a little bit. And I always go back to a quote. There's a difference. Lifters, if you want to try to be a master lifter, kettlebell, Olympic lift, powerlifting, you're trying to become highly adaptable, notice the context, to a limited number of movements. But everybody else, athletes, general fitness enthusiasts, we're trying to be have a more adaptable body, right? So it's a difference between being highly adapted to a limited number of movements or have a more adaptable body to a large set of environments. Meaning, you could go hiking and you feel like, you're probably fitter than the average person there, but maybe you're not a master hiker, whatever that is, right? You can go out and play tennis and not feel like, you're going to go home and have full body tendonitis, right? Because your body has never rotated like that before. So if you only did a limited number of movements, then your functional capacity is very low, right? You're highly functional in a limited number of movements, but outside that, you don't have a large functional capacity. So when we talk about exercise variety, it's still sticking to the basics as movement patterns, pushing, pulling, right? Hip hinging, knee bending, yada, yada. The question is how we're going to try to find as many ways to load those patterns as possible, which not only trains them from the neck up, it's fun when you have that variety. It's interesting, right? But we're also increasing your functional capacity because we're not just trying to get you to be a master of bench pressing. We're trying to get you a master of being able to push in any way.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, no, I think that's a really nice sort of concluding statement there, Nick. Anna, do you have? Because we're coming towards the end of our hour, but I love that whole thought of the generalized movement patterns. We work around those. We can achieve what we want to achieve. There's fun there. There's stimulus. There's variety, but there's also that metabolic effect that you speak to, Anna. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, well, actually, just to kind of conclude on that metabolic effect is important because that's what the clients, the general public, actually evaluates if the program is working. Is do they see any progress in their body composition, kind of, or their looks in the mirror, or how they feel in their own body? And I would just like to kind of make a point on load, because you do need to, you talked about loading different patterns, Nick, and you do really need to kind of see how much you can load the client to get the physiology to respond. But there are so many clients that actually do not tolerate the load yet. So you have to find a way how to increase the load in a different way. And it can be increasing not just the load in form of more weight or something, but it can be increasing the neural load, increasing the load where you actually do something where you like increasing neural load can be you can do a movement like a get up, for example, because you need to actually orient yourself in space, and you don't load the body too much because the client would not be able to lift that much weight. But it's such a complex exercise that there are so many pathways starting to fire that would make them more neurally effective, and then you will start to kind of increasingly be able to get them to tense more and then relax, and tense more and then relax, and then maybe do them to make them do exercises a little slower so that you can get more muscle tension, and just a really slow progression. But just be aware that before the real weight load, there are other ways to load the client which you need to consider to begin to make them into metabolic effect, and to close the gap from what they can do and what is required for the metabolic effect. So really be aware of how you bring them through that gap as safely as possible.
Fantastic. We've got some questions. I'm not going to dwell on them greatly because our hour is up, and I think we've covered most of the questions anyway. But just I mean, there's a couple here. Somebody's saying that, you know, we have a problem because a lot of guys go out and they're doing exercises they've seen on YouTube, and then they come to a personal trainer, and we're trying to give them some form of exercise, maybe, you know, a corrective exercise, and it feels, for the client, it feels a little bit lame. They want to be doing this big exercise that they've done on YouTube. But I guess that maybe, Nick, comes back to your 4 Fs, and I've forgotten your 4 Fs. But I think it was function and fun were certainly 2 of them.
Yeah, fitness, function, fat loss, fun.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and that's to say, it's up to the trainer to find, I would say, you know, if a client wants that, then what they're really saying, kind of speaking from that neck up thing, is what they're saying is that I want to feel like I'm being challenged this way. And if you don't make me feel that way, I'm going to feel like I'm getting less of a service, and probably I'm going to go somewhere else that someone who is going to give that to me. And maybe that person I choose is not going to be as knowledgeable as the person that they're currently with. Right. So I would say is, again, life is full of, you know, compromises and constraints. Right. So at that point, the trainer needs to say, okay, what can I do to give the client the feeling that they want? Right. But in a way that I don't feel like is compromising my integrity, which means I don't think it's less safe or whatnot. So there's nothing wrong with saying, well, hey, you don't have to, I'm not comfortable with you doing that exercise that you know, that exact exercise that person in that video is doing. However, I got some really cool things that you can do that are going to kick your butt, just like that type of exercise would. Right.
Yes.
So this whole idea of, you know, that, you know, anybody can train anybody to make them tired, but only a good trainer can make you better. I get all that, but it's like, well, yeah, but in order to make you better, I have to challenge you. So I do have to kind of make you tired. Yes. So, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. You know, you can kick somebody's butt, you can create a metabolic training effect. And it doesn't mean that you're just being lazy with programming and just giving everybody 100 reps of this and 50 reps of that and no rest and bing, bang, boom, pay me my money.
Yes.
You know, one doesn't equal the other.
No, I guess that sort of speaks to the skill of being a personal trainer, that we're in a profession that does require, you know, quite a lot of knowledge and quite a lot of skill. And I guess I would sort of, therefore, you know, finish this little discussion on exactly that, you know, the importance of going and get yourself fully qualified, and experienced, so that you are able to adapt in those ways, and you are able to bring something new and stimulating and fun and functional to your clients. So that's a big shout out there for eReps, and please, you know, get involved with us and continue to professionalize your practice. But just to conclude this, just like to thank David, who had to leave a little bit early. Thank you, David, for your input. Thank you to Anna and Nick. I could listen to you guys all day. Fantastic. Really appreciate, I always appreciate you joining us, Anna, but really appreciate Nick joining us today, because I know it was pretty short notice, Nick. It's early morning there. You've done us a great turn there, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, Julian and Anna. And everybody who is taking the time to listen.
Well, I hope we can call on you again, Nick. I think we've got a conversation later, so that would be great. But
thank you for an amazing discussion. That was just so fun to kind of look at the subject from different ways.
Thank you, Anna. Great stuff. Okay, everybody. Thanks for attending, and see you next time. Bye-bye.